How's it going?
First time seeing one.
It's pretty cool, right? Yeah. It's only Thanks so much.
See, gets positive reaction.
That's the thing. There's so many ways to decide whether or not a car is a Lotus, but one thing that I have found was that people stop and talk to you all the time and ask about it, and people stop and talk about this car all the time when you're driving it. Hello Lotus, and welcome back to the most informative Lotus channel on YouTube. And today I am here with Mike from Getaway Driving, and we are in a Lotus Eletre Carbon R, or Carbon Eletre, not to be confused with Carmen Electra. And it is a nice shade of pink too, so I feel like Carmen might be into this car, to be honest with you.
This is a shade that is popular with everybody, as we just found out. So we have this car today, courtesy of Boardwalk Lotus in Redwood City, California. This car is for sale with them right now. And we brought it to an event. We wanted to get some reactions to this car. And we saw some really interesting perspectives. Of course, not very many people know what this car is. There are only 50-ish of them in the United States of America, and that may be all we get. Tariff situation has been fluid, but it has paused the shipping of these cars to this continent. I've been driving it for a couple of days, so I'm bringing a slightly different perspective to this car because I love Lotus as a brand. I am a Lotus owner. I've been participating in Lotus stuff with Roger for years now. You know, as we've said in other videos, I've covered tens of thousands of miles in Elise and Exige and Evora and Amira. And so I am a big fan of pure, analog, lightweight, all the stuff that Lotus stands for. And that's like, right in the center of where my heart is. But also, for 5 or so years now, I have also owned and operated a business that helps people buy their first electric car. So I have had one foot firmly in EV land. I actually bought a Model 3 Performance for the specific purpose of tracking it. I wanted to bring it to the track, see what EV performance was all about. Can you have fun in an EV? Can an EV have soul? Which is, so common. The thing that you hear among sports car enthusiasts or auto enthusiasts in general is that they just don't connect to the machine, right? And that's what Lotus has traditionally been all about.
Right.
So, coming to this vehicle, I was excited, and I followed the development of the Eletre and the Emea because I wanted a company like Lotus to put their passion for driving dynamics and engagement into EVs. Because, frankly, EVs need Lotus as much as Lotus, needs EVs.
And the EV route was supposed to really be the thing that saved Lotus financially, right? And it's just, they were really looking for something to do what the Cayenne did for Porsche, for Lotus to have a volume mover. But because of the economics of everything, it's not going to happen in North America anyway. And then the response from typical Lotus drivers, if they don't think the Amira is a real Lotus, but it's actually a pretty cool car. And when we were at the car show a little bit earlier, the responses that we got were overwhelmingly positive. But I just don't think anyone knows anything about it in the States. No one's seen one in person. There's only a few at dealers, and it doesn't, a lot of these new shapes that are coming out, like the new design language and where things are going, don't always photograph that well. It's been a surprising experience for me. You had driven the car a couple of years ago overseas.
Yes, I first experienced the Lotus Eletre R at the Munich Motor Show, or the IAA Mobility Show. I got behind the wheel of one there and was able to do kind of a freeway loop around that festival, and I was impressed. I was impressed by the fact that it felt fun. It felt more fun in ways than my Model 3 Performance did on the track, because this car, one of the immediate things that I noticed about this car is it is not EV tidy in how it puts its power down. My Model 3 Performance was very fast, but you put your foot in it and it just goes very unceremoniously. It just rockets forward, but there's no drama. This car will get out from under you.
Right.
And you don't expect that in a car of this shape and weight. And so it's really surprising the first time it happens. The guy that I did the drive with knew it was going to happen. I didn't. He told me to floor it, and it got a little sideways on me. And so I actually love that. I love that I'm still needed. I love that I'm involved. and that the car is thrilling in a way because it is not just computer predictable. It is really different in that way. Look at that four-wheel steering. Holy crap. This thing has four-wheel steering, and it is useful.
Well, I think what I've been so surprised by being in this car with you the last day, it's really I have nothing against EVs, but I'm not really that interested in them, predominantly because everything I've driven feels the same, and it feels pretty boring. It's fun that they're fast, but this feels pretty alive, and it's more interesting than I think. I don't know. I think so much. I don't think the marketing materials and the information that Lotus put out really connect with what it's actually like to be in this car. It's just much better than you would expect. But I think you also have to have a fairly open mind to give it a chance for what it is and it is. I mean, it's not a track car.
Yeah,
right?
well, this is not, so we know you're warming up your keyboard fingers to type that this is not a Lotus. And we understand the sentiment. This, simplify and add lightness. This car isn't light, and it's not simple. This car has motorized lidar sensors that extract themselves from the bodywork for self-driving. It has louvers that are mechanically motorized to let airflow in and out of the battery when needed. It has a spoiler that motors up and down in the back. This car has all of those complicated bits, and so it is not simplify and add lightness. It is a different thing. So the Lotus loyalists, I understand why there is an aversion to this at first, but I want to speak to it because I am also EV guide. I am also an EV guy, and so I have to put my EV hat on. And when I put my EV hat on, this is a phenomenal electric vehicle. It's one of the fastest charging vehicles you can buy. This thing is lightning fast at the plug. It is extraordinarily quick. 905 horsepower will do that.
Yeah.
It corners incredibly flat. I mean, we've had it on off ramps at, legal-ish speeds, and the car yawns. I mean, I don't know what the limits are on this thing. We haven't had the chance to do any performance testing, but on the street, you will not come anywhere near them, and the car will not fuss in any way. There's no lean, there's no squeal, this car just swallows what you throw at it. It is incredibly comfortable in here. It's one of the nicest interiors I have seen in any car at any price point, and that includes the ultra luxury stuff. The tech is really good. The screen is super fast responsive. The graphics are great. The menus are pretty good. There's plenty of. I still don't know how to open the glove box, but that's a thing that you have to figure out with cars like this. You need to spend some initial time with them to get to that stuff. And so if you start to look at it in the realm of EVs, it is among the best I have ever driven, if not the best.
Yeah, it just seems so usable too. I mean, because it's a fairly big car, but because it has four-wheel steering, and you can really move it and place it easily. It doesn't feel, at least to me, it doesn't feel like a big car. I don't know. It just feels like it was really thought out in terms of what it's actually like to drive. And we've been driving around San Francisco in tight spaces, and it really maneuvers nicely, I think. But all these things are, these are not the things that you typically talk about when you're talking about a Lotus, right? So it's is it even worth thinking about in terms is the fact that it's a Lotus, does it matter?
I mean, driving it around the past few days, my overwhelming takeaway is that this is just a really lovely car to drive just around town.
Yeah.
It feels smaller than it is. This is a big car. This is a large SUV. Lotus was working on a smaller SUV, kind of a Macan competitor. I'm not sure if they still are. There's been speculation both ways. But this was kind of meant to be a Cayenne competitor when it came out. But I think it elevates above that. So I think now people are experiencing the car, and they're actually comparing it to things like the Lamborghini Urus, because that's where the performance and the luxury, that's the level that this car is at. So driving it around, you expect it to be great, but it is actually just a really comfortable car to drive. It's extremely quiet. The materials are phenomenal. I mean, the wheel is Alcantara with carbon fiber inlays. There's just really soft touch material everywhere. Premium details. The ambient lighting in here is really rich looking, really expensive looking, but it's not overwrought like some of the luxury stuff where they add a little too much of that stuff. And so it just feels ultra premium in a way that's incredibly comfortable, and the car shrinks around you as you drive. It feels much smaller than its outward proportions would suggest. And that's my biggest takeaway is like I leave this car and I'm still thinking about it. Like I'm like, oh, I'd rather be driving the Eletre right now. And that's the mark of a great car.
I really had no idea what to expect. But before seeing it, I thought maybe it was just going to be a boring kind of brand exercise, that it wouldn't really have anything particularly unique about it. And then I don't know why I kind of came in with that perspective. I think there's just sort of a cynicism around, a sports car maker doing an SUV, and it's hard to not have you always want to see like more sports cars. But the reality is for like daily driving, we all need daily driving cars for the most part, and cars that we can commute in, and take a family around in, or move some gear, or put you can't put a golf bag in an Amira, really, So if you need to do that, the Eletre ends up being it's an interesting option in there because there's so few. I mean, one of the things that we heard a lot talking to folks today was that they see, in certain parts of the country, like San Francisco, they see a Urus like all the time, and a lot of folks seem like they really wanted something different. And I have to say too, the car in person really is pretty striking and really nice looking. But it's you've got to see it in person, I think. Yeah. It's one of those things you really do have to drive it. I think that's been the case with all Lotuses. Like, you need to see it in person. You need to actually drive it before you can really understand it and have any kind of opinion that's really worthwhile.
Yeah, the reactions that we saw at this event, and this was an event of classic cars that had an EV component to it, and we actually didn't show up as part of the EV display. We showed up as an individual, and we parked amongst the British cars, and so we actually had this parked between an Austin Healey and a Mini.
With the E-types all around it, too.
And so it drew attention, but the attention that it drew was overwhelmingly positive. Yeah. People came up and they said, wow, that's a beautiful car. Totally. And so this is a car that you've seen in the images, and it hasn't been universal praise. But when you see it in person today, it was universal praise.
Well, especially this carbon pack too. Like, it is. I'm not someone who's ever been super into carbon fiber, but the way they've done it here is really nice. I mean, all throughout the internal stuff, and the splitter on front and all the. I mean, it's really it's a really nice looking car. It feels like it's worth the price point, which is something that I wasn't sure about before actually seeing it in person. I think you really do need to experience it to get that sense.
And we have to talk about the price point, because this is a $243,000 car and change. Yeah, so that's where we've landed after tariffs.
It's 2 Amiras, or what is it, like 10 Miatas?
Yeah, and this is, you're talking about grocery getting. This is not a typical grocery getter for most people at that price point. This is a special thing.
Yeah.
This is a certain kind of buyer who is going to be very discerning. But I really believe this experience lives up to that discernment.
Yeah, I mean, from everyone we spoke to that saw it for the first time today, it seemed like people that were kind of interested in having something unique with, particular style and just something interesting and different. I think that's who this is really for. And I was thinking about the other SUVs that are in this category. Obviously, there's the Urus, but you also recently drove the Macan EV. So, like, how would you compare it, like, what it's like to be in that versus this? And obviously, the price points are different.
Yeah, very different price points. But, originally, before the tariffs, those two were supposed to be similarly priced at top spec.
Yeah.
And I think the Lotus would have really exceeded the Macan in experience at that price point. I mean, I think this car, at its original price point pre-tariff, was punching well above its weight.
Yeah.
And so it's a credit to it that even after the tariff price, it's a compelling option against something like a Urus. That's how much it was really. That's how much it was lifting. It was doing, and so the Macan. I think the Porsche EVs are very nice. But I think that I don't think this is going to be controversial even amongst Porsche enthusiasts. I think the EV stuff, the interiors, the experience behind the wheel, doesn't feel quite as premium as the gasoline Porsche stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's just like material choices and of course more screens. And I don't know if that's like a weight thing, if they're trying to save weight or if they're trying to keep manufacturing costs down to remain competitive in the EV space. I don't know what the reason for that is, but it feels like the Macan, I enjoyed my time in that vehicle, but it feels like it was not quite as nice as some other Porsches I've been in. So in thinking about what EVs exist out there, I mean, there's not a lot at this price point. You're getting into, you're above the Porsche stuff, you're below the Rolls-Royce stuff.
Yep.
So it really does kind of land around the Urus, but the Urus is a very guttural, thirsty gasoline experience, and so this is a very different flavor from that car. So it does stand kind of unique on its own in the market in that space, but that makes it kind of a niche vehicle, and Lotus has always been a niche alternative choice.
They continue to do that well,
and so in that way it fits the brand. It fits the it is. We were talking to somebody at the event today who said that their neighbor has a Urus, and they thought that this Lotus looked nicer, felt nicer inside, and they were very interested in driving it because they didn't want a Urus. They wanted something different. And so I think that's what this offers. And if you're in the market for a Urus, I honestly don't know what people are doing with Uruses. What I think they're not getting groceries.
I mean,
It's a date night car.
I think it's certainly a date night car, and it's a car to be seen in, I think, for sure. Right.
So one of my favorite little flourishes of this car, I like that it's emotional. I like that when you put your foot down, it gets a little squirrely out from underneath you. That gets your heart fluttering. I like that when you put it from tour mode into track mode, the car on the air suspension hunches down at the same time that the seat bolstering motors in and hugs you. It feels alive, like it's transforming around you. Little things like that are incredibly emotional touches that are the types of things that I think EVs need. I think that, like, if you're gonna extract performance, you've got to feel connected to the machine in other ways. I have said on record in other forums that I think one of the biggest benefits of EVs is the combination of the instant torque plus, and the instant torque gets talked about a lot, but on the other side of that, the negative, the yin and yang of that is the regen. So EVs can really start to feel like a scalpel when you have that instant acceleration, but then you also have sort of an equally instant deceleration in your regen, and so it can feel very scalpel-like, and you can really map the forward and the acceleration and deceleration to the movement of your foot. It feels very direct in a way that a gasoline car doesn't, and that is a way where you feel more connected to the machine in an EV than you do in a gasoline car. So things like that, where it's better because it's an EV. Now, the other side of that is, they're heavier, and so the steering assist is ratcheted up, and you lose feel in the wheel, and that's plagued EVs of all kinds. There's not a ton of feel in the wheel of this car, but there's a trade-off in those two things, I think, and what ends up happening is you feel connected in other ways, and so I think EVs have to come up with those other ways. The combination of regen and instant torque is one, and I think those little emotional touches of involving you in how the vehicle reacts to what you've asked it to do is certainly a good example of another.
What I really like about being in the car too is that it has all this tech, but the way that it's implemented is, the design is really nice, and it's not overwhelming to be in the car, and like the displays for the speedometer and all the information. It's done in a really elegant way. interestingly enough, it doesn't feel like an EV to be in it with you, to be driven around in it. I think that there's something about how the power is put down that doesn't, like I think you were saying, that smooth power delivery with kind of no feeling. It feels, I don't know, it feels a little bit more alive. It feels a little bit more like a gas car to be in, but without the noise, and then of course it's got this incredible amount of horsepower, but the tech is also it has a lot of tech in it, and
a lot of tech.
like I said, it's certainly not simple, but the implementation of it is pretty good. The screen, what we were talking about earlier, does a full screen CarPlay, which, from my understanding, almost nobody else does.
Yeah, that was surprising to me and welcomed, where this giant screen is filled with CarPlay rather than other automakers who just give you a little window to have your CarPlay in. This takes over the whole experience, and that's great, man. CarPlay really stretches into those dimensions quite well.
Yeah, there's just I think Lotus, more than almost anyone, has just a lot of baggage, interesting, good baggage, I guess, that made it harder for them probably to do an SUV, and an electric one at that, than almost anyone else. It's taken Ferrari this long to. I think they said that they would never do a 4-door car, full stop, and now they've got the Imperial Sangway, and people just react really strongly to this stuff as if it's like a personal. How's it going?
First time seeing one.
It's pretty cool, right? Yeah. It's only. Thanks so much.
See, gets positive reactions.
That's the thing. Driving this car around is. So I will tell you, there's so many ways to decide whether or not a car is a Lotus, but one thing that I found with the semi-modern ones, is that people stop and talk to you all the time and ask about it, and people stop and talk about this car all the time when you're driving it. We've been had multiple people roll down the window to say something
in traffic
in this car. That is, in fact, probably more so than in an Elise or an Emira.
And the Spectrum, because that was a municipal bus driver that just called out to us.
Right.
And prior to that, it was two guys in a modded 987 Cayman.
Right. And so, that says something, and I think it's also when a car maker decides to offer a new model that is different than their core, it's not a personal attack to your sensibilities about what they have. It's just a product line. I don't know. I think people get very tied up in identity sometimes with this stuff, and but a shoemaker can make different kind, a hiking boot and a running shoe. It doesn't mean that they've sold out their core. And I think offering something that is more usable to the mass market is not. The whole point of it is to keep the company going. And for a lot of these guys, it's these kind of cars that make the sports cars possible, because if you looked at how many Emiras and Elises they sell, there's a few going out the door every day, and that's about it. That's not enough to run a big car company, and I do think it's what makes the sports cars really special, because they're handmade, and there's not a lot of them, but it doesn't mean that they can't have a volume plate to go with it.
Yeah, and everybody says that Lotus made a mistake by going electric and by embracing this type of vehicle. I don't agree. Now, in retrospect, maybe the timing wasn't right.
Yeah.
But when sitting down and thinking about strategy, now Geely acquired Lotus, and the goal was to make Lotus more of a global presence in the vein of something like a Porsche. Because, Lotus, performance-wise, has always been an alternative choice to Porsche, but when it comes to people who just want to buy a car to live with, Lotus is not top of mind. They're going to go to the Porsche dealer down the street. And so, in that mind share and market share, more of a equivalent and someone to go toe-to-toe with someone like Porsche. Now, the Electra and the Amaya are fully electric at a time and fully realized great EV products. If you just purely analyze them as EVs, this is a very, very good electric product. And it is something that Lotus, with Geely's help, was able to beat Porsche to this market segment. Whereas I don't think Lotus would have been able to beat Porsche to any market segment in the gasoline sector. Especially given that they're such a small operation traditionally. So Geely gave them an opportunity through Geely's expertise in electrification to kind of take a shortcut in the market and undercut Porsche, so to speak, using F1 terms, and because the world was moving that way. Now, the world has retracted a bit. And a lot of governments and manufacturers are walking back some of the regulations and strategies that they had to go fully electric at the speed that they were originally wanting to go. And it feels like Lotus got caught in that with these products. But that doesn't mean they're not great EVs. And now Lotus is going to put range extenders in this car and the Amaya overseas. And it doesn't seem like we're going to get those here in the US. But that's a very compelling package too, because the electrification is heading toward the extended range setup, the series hybrid, where you have a smaller gasoline engine that's working basically as a generator to keep the batteries charged, as the electric drivetrain is 100% of the drive power. Now that's how the BMW i3 works. It's how the Fisker Karma used to work, and sort of how the Chevy Volt works, although it's a gray area because that car could clutch its power in.
The wheels.
And so, yeah, but there's a ton of vehicles coming out in that configuration. The new Scouts, the Mazda's working on stuff with rotary engines, Ford, Hyundai are all working on platforms that have that extended range EV. So that is also the future, and it seems like Lotus is now trying to then undercut that as well by putting that into these cars, and I think they'll be even more compelling for it. We just may not get them here.
Right. And so when I'm thinking about this, it's like, who is the car? Like, who is it for? Can you analyze it? Is it just from an EV perspective? Like, does it matter that it's even an EV? Or, like, it feels to me like a very distinct, unique product, like, kind of just on its own. And it happens to have an EV powertrain. But it's a really interesting, I don't know, it's a really interesting car. And maybe we shouldn't just classify things just as EV or not EV. There's more to it. But I feel like a lot of enthusiasts think EVs are just boring, and this car is not boring. And I think if you want to be, like, I don't know, if you're someone who wants a car, I mean, if you want to be noticed, this is a pretty good, I don't know, I mean, it does seem like a car you choose. There's a style element here, right? I mean, it's kind of the same reason you might buy a designer shirt or something. I mean, you are paying more for something really unique and also really well made. I mean, I was commenting on this when we were getting it out, like, this thing is put together much better than I expected. I mean, it feels, I don't know, it feels as good or better than the Emira does, I think, from a put together standpoint. I mean, you've spent more time with it than I have. What do you think about?
I think this interior is up there with the best in the world. And that's both materiality, its construction, how it all fits together, its technology, how fast and responsive the screens are, and its style. Like the ribbon strip that they use, where you've got a small screen for the driver and passenger, I think is a really elegant solution. The ambient lighting is beautiful, and the experience of, like, just opening and closing doors or pushing a button to raise the hatch, and the movement of that, it all works exactly the way you expect it to, and in very pleasant ways that are like little moments of delight.
Yeah, it feels really tight, and and I said before, like, that there was a style element to it, and I think all Lotuses generally have had a lot of great style, but there's also clearly, like, really great substance to it too.
I'll say this steering wheel,
yeah,
I want it in my Emira. It is so good. The Alcantara feels great. The carbon inlays are like just expensive. The buttons feel like everything you touch feels like jewelry.
Yeah.
And it's really, really nice to operate. And so yeah, I would love to have this wheel in the Emira.
And so all right, so I told you kind of who do you think that that this car is for?
I mean, I think this car is for someone who wants head-turning looks that in an alternative way. Like this is, I mean, obviously the Lamborghini Urus has head-turning looks,
Yeah.
but is it weird to say they're common? It feels, in the crowd that we went into today, in an affluent area,
Yeah.
of people who clearly had disposable income,
Yep.
there was this idea that the Urus was too common.
Totally.
And yeah, parts of the world like that exist.
Oh, yeah. And almost every other person said that. I mean, who was looking at it in a serious way.
Yeah.
Compared it to that. And which, it's interesting, before getting in this car, I would have thought, yeah, the Urus is a level up. But then having talked to a lot of people today, it feels like they're actually pretty well, they're fairly matched.
At this level of price,
Yeah.
we're well past the the point of diminishing returns on actual stuff. It becomes more aesthetic, style, the way it makes you feel, the way that the presence that it has. These are intangibles, and where Lotus has always lived is in the sphere of intangibles.
Yeah.
Like the Exige and the Elise, and then through the Evora and Emira. On a spec sheet, they're never the best car.
Right.
But you get behind the wheel, and all the stuff that isn't on a spec sheet, feeling in the wheel, communication between the chassis and the driver, the sensations of it, are where Lotus shines. And now it's hard to communicate that because people can only read what's on a sheet. But if you have to experience the car. And I think this is the same. You have to experience this car firsthand. And we saw today that people who knew what it was but had never seen one or didn't know what it was were drawn to this car. It was like a magnet at that event.
Yeah.
And so I think this car remains true to that Lotus, to the way Lotus has been traditionally in that way, where it lives in the intangibles, it thrives with the intangible stuff, and it is appealing for those reasons.
Yeah, I'm with you. It doesn't. There is something Lotus about whether it's the uniqueness or, I mean, exclusivity in a way. It doesn't feel like just a brand exercise. It's not just a company buying, Lotus's IP and then putting their badge on everything and pretending it's a Lotus. I mean, it's, for better or worse, it's not like anything else. That's another, Lotus hallmark. So it's like, yeah, it's not a lightweight sports car, but in its class, it's really interesting. And I don't know, there's something nice about getting into a car and it actually being different, which is definitely a Lotus thing too. So many cars, I mean, seem the same inside. Nothing about this seems the same as anything. There cannot be much part sharing going on here. And even like things like the quality of like the quilting on the seats and things like that are not things you would expect from Lotus, but there's, I don't know, the blend of luxuriousness and sportiness is really nice. And yeah, I don't know, I think it's probably a lot better than what you think.
Yeah. I mean, what is a Lotus? Well, Lotus is telling us what they are. And right now, they are both a sports car manufacturer who makes an incredibly compelling V6 supercharged manual transmission hydraulic steering sports car that is among the best in the modern era, that harkens back to a golden age of like on-street supercar performance. And then they're saying they are also equally electrification, luxury, you can have it all, because this car has it all. This car has all of the premium stuff that you would have to like reach super high up in the catalog over at the Bentleys or Porsches to get. This car has it all. It's got lidar sensors that protrude from the bodywork and like map your surround. Like that's crazy. I don't know of any other car that ships with lidar.
Right. Well, and it's an interesting thing, and I think back about Lotus, they've never had a lot of money, but they've always pushed forward on technology, and they've been willing to try things that weren't necessarily popular at the time. I mean, you go back to before the Elise, you had the Elan, the Elan M100. That's a Lotus with a front-wheel drive. It's like they're using the Elan nameplate on a front-wheel drive car. And if you go back and look at the reviews at the time, they're like, this is the best front-wheel drive car we've ever driven, and it feels like a rear-wheel drive car. The market doesn't always, and it doesn't act rationally all the time, but I think Lotus actually does have a history of, they haven't just been one thing. They really have tried a lot of things. And so I think, since the future, I think, is electrification ultimately, it makes sense to me that they would be in this playground, and this seems like a good place to start. Kind of on the way to electric sports cars too. And so, I don't know. There's more to it that makes it a Lotus than kind of I thought before we started talking about it. And I certainly don't feel offended or feel like Lotus has betrayed me by making an SUV.
I mean, I'm just glad this car exists. I can't afford it.
Really cool. Same, but like it could tow an
But
Elise.
I want it.
It's like I'd love to take to tow my Amira GT4 right to the track and something like this, right?
That's $500,000 you just spent.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the reality is it's a really cool car, and if you're in the U.S., it's going to be very, very exclusive.
Yeah,
right?
This car needs the type of owner in the U.S. that, yes, you are in a certain tax bracket. You are driving something that is incredibly rare, incredibly special, and, comes with the pitfalls of something that's incredibly rare. Like, you're going to have to think about servicing this thing more. I mean, obviously, Boardwalk is ready to service this, no problem.
Yep.
And also, it won't need that much service because it's an EV. But there are little things, over time that can go wrong because, as we covered, there's lots of little motorized things, and any manufacturer is going to have something that's that needs attention. So, putting up with that stuff is part of owning a Lotus anyway. Because if you're buying into Lotus, especially if you're getting the stuff that's so revered, the Elise, the Exige, then we're getting to the point on those cars where owners are like figuring out homemade solutions to fix something because a part just isn't available anymore.
Right. Yeah. No, it's been it really is a cool car, and
when I think about EVs, I always look, when I was setting up EV Guide, one of the things that felt like was missing in the marketplace for people who were trying to buy an EV was a education and communication around what makes one EV better than another. And in my mind, there's a few key things that you need. One is you need the ability to charge it easily at home or on the go. Now, at home varies widely for different people depending on their home situations. On the go, it used to be Tesla dominated that because they had the supercharger network, and that was a much bigger network than the others. And so Tesla had this big lead for a long time. Now, they've opened up that network to other automakers, and it's not everybody yet, but it will be.
Right.
And so that has gone away. That's no longer a concern. So the second thing is that your car has to charge fast. Now, this is it's really incredible how many people buy an EV without understanding first that the EV they're buying charges at a different speed than another.
Yeah.
So I look at something like a Chevy Bolt.
Yep.
Chevy Bolt is a great little car. By all standards, it has they've been reliable. Owners love them. They had a little problem with a recall a while back, but that's been smoothed over, and the second generation especially have been great. Now the Chevy Bolt charges at a maximum of 55 kilowatts.
Okay.
Now that is now to put this on a spectrum for those who don't know EVs, the fastest charging EVs will usually have a peak charge speed around 350 kilowatts.
Right.
On the low end, like a plug-in hybrid might have a charge speed of like 11 kilowatts. So a 55 is closer to slow than it is to fast.
Right.
And most stuff is in the middle. It's like stuff like the Volkswagen stuff, the Ford Mach-E's, those are at about 150 kilowatt.
Yep.
So, you pull up to a charger in one of those, and they're going to charge at an average speed. And an average speed is probably you're going to spend 30 minutes at the plug to get to 80%, in realistic terms, because it varies. Of course, you have to find a fast plug. Plugs charge at different speeds.
Yep.
It depends on the temperature of your battery when you roll up, if you've been driving a while. It depends on the ambient temperature, the air temperature, and like if it's hot or cold. So there's all these things that can affect your charge curve. But to give yourself the best chance of charging quickly, you want a car that's capable of charging quickly to meet with a charger that is equally capable of that speed. Now, the Bolt at 55 kilowatts, you're going to spend 45 minutes to an hour at the plug.
Yeah.
So that is 25, 30 minutes extra on every time you have to charge publicly.
Yeah.
And that means can you drive across the country in a Bolt? Yeah. Would you want to? Maybe, but it's going to take you longer. And now if you get something like a Hyundai Ioniq 5,
which my wife has, we have an Ioniq 5 long range rear wheel drive at home. And I was actually something I was going to mention was, one of the things I knew when we bought it that it had very fast charging. I think it can do 350 kilowatt hours per kilowatts. And there are chargers around that can do maybe up to 400 that we've used quite a bit. I think the speed of being able to recharge has become obvious to me that's more important even than the range. It's not that it's great to have a lot of range, but being able to stop and recharge in 15 minutes makes it so much more usable, because we often do road trip. If you're doing any kind of road trips or doing long drives, the recharge time I think is potentially a bigger deal than the range.
Yeah, and you have to be realistic too. There are road warriors who say I need 600 miles of range. Well, it's like, can your bladder last 600 miles? Because you're going to have to stop and you're going to have to use the restroom. Maybe you want to grab a bite to eat. And I'm speaking from experience owning EVs. I've had 7 plug-in cars now since 2014, and you stop and you use the restroom and you buy a water and you come back out, you check the 3 text messages and 2 inbox items that have been plaguing your attention. You saw the notification come in, but you haven't checked it and it's on your mind. You check those and suddenly you're done charging. And so if you're in that 15 to 25 minute range, then you're pretty good. And if you're hauling some kids who all have to use the bathroom too, then your time goes up. So now this car is incredibly fast. This is a 117 kilowatt hour battery in this thing. It's a big battery. And you can charge that battery 0 to 80% in 18 minutes. That's incredibly fast. Now it takes a fast charger. If you pull up to a charger that's only capable of doing 150 kilowatts, you're going to wait longer. It's a big battery. But you find a fast car and a fast charger, this one will be as fast as the fastest out there. And the charge curve itself is also very fast in this car. And I've been talking a lot about peak power, but the charge curve itself and how it ramps up that charge speed over time matters. And this one does it very, very fast. I'm going to say that I know this car is controversial. There's nothing that we're going to say giving this car context that's going to make it less controversial. But I understand that it's difficult to see a brand that so strongly stands for something pivot to something else. But I do think that the brands who are able to do that and to deliver a compelling product on both sides of that pivot are the ones that really stand the test of time. Because they're able to adapt with the changing world and the changing attitudes and sentiments. The world moves on, and you're either able to flow downstream with it or you get lost. It's why nobody has Blackberries anymore. And I feel like
I was such in the BlackBerry camp. I resisted the iPhone at first.
And I feel like this car is such a statement.
Yeah.
It is such a, like, take the badges off it for a minute. It is such a compelling EV product. And I know it's priced higher than it was originally supposed to be. I think at its original price that they planned on bringing it over, this car would have sold like hotcakes. The moment you understood what this car is and what it does and how it performs and drives, for the value, it
really was under market, I think.
I really think this car was underpriced. And now it's almost like the tariffs have, I mean, yes, it's very expensive, and it's a certain class of person who's going to be able to afford this car, a certain tax bracket. But if you are, it's still compelling at that price point. And I think it's one of the most desirable high-end automotive products out there. And that's a bold statement, I know, because there's a lot of stuff you can buy for $243,000.
Sure.
But how many of those have the boot space of this with the family space in the back, all of the tech, all of the cachet and the specialness that this one has? And how many of those leave you thinking about it when you walk away?
Totally.
I'm going to be pretty sad to give this car back. This is genuinely one of the most enjoyable drive experiences I've had, in an EV.
Yeah.
So, I applaud them for that. I'm sad that we can't get this in its, in its full form, and I say that by like shipping more of these here and having them be more competitive in the market. But for those who can reach for these cars, I think they're a very special thing to have in the garage.
It absolutely feels like a really special car when you get in and out of it. And I mean, again, the response that we saw was just, I mean, people stopped in their tracks to look at this car who had, and who had no idea what it was, and it really has a lot of presence in person. And so I think, if you're the kind of person who wants that, or if you have a business that could use that for marketing purposes, because it also weighs a lot.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's check with your tax professional. This is not financial advice, but should qualify for Section 179 deduction. So, with that in mind, I mean, if you want to get attention, or you have a business that can use something of this size, I think that's a pretty compelling place to use it, because I mean, advertising is all about getting people's attention, and this car gets people's attention, and it is absolutely a way to stand out. But it also is
especially in this color.
Yeah, I mean, this color is unbelievable, and but it's also just, I think you would find this car to just be really, really enjoyable to own. I mean, and to just own and live with. It just.
And the other thing, driving this around for a few days really makes me want the Amaya, because I can kind of imagine it now. Because the interiors are very similar, the exteriors are very similar, but the Amaya is basically this but lower down to the ground, and I want that experience. Like I would daily the hell out of that. That would be a compelling package for sure, and I just don't think we'll ever see them here now.
I know.
Oh, I do. I have one issue with this and the Amaya, and it's one that I'm on record saying it online. And I'll say it here, Lotus should be happy. They're joyful cars. Every interaction you have with people are joyful interactions. And this and the Amaya, they have scowling faces. The design language is very aggressive. They are scowling at you when you look at them. They're like a lion that's kind of like sort of hissing at you, right? Like that's kind of the vibe of the front. And then you look at the history of Lotus, and they're all goofballs. Yeah. They're all happy-looking tadpoles, and that brings so much joy. Yeah. And so, I kind of want to just reconfigure the front fascia to have a little bit more of that.
More of a smile.
Joy. And hey, if you want it to be aggressive, make it mischievous. But, that's my biggest complaint here is...
interesting.
Is I would like to see a happier face. Yes. But
I think the front looks great, and
it does look great.
And it's also, I don't know, I feel like they were ahead of the curve where, I mean, some people like where automotive design is going, like where you're looking at things like the new Ferrari F80 or the Testarossa that they just announced and are showing pictures of, or Jaguar, where they're heading toward this more brutalistic design. I think the path to get there is kind of interesting, and it feels like this is part of that. I don't know. I'm trying to, it's new design language is hard sometimes to absorb, I think, and but the way it is on the front of this car, with some I feel like it gets too blacked out in the middle, and you can't really see shapes and things like that. The way it's done on this one, especially with the carbon fiber on front, like there's a lot of really interesting detail up front, and I don't know. The more I look at it, the more I find it interesting, and the more I like it. But thank you all again for watching this piece. We hope you enjoyed it. We're doing a lot more Lotus content now that the channel is back up and running, and special thanks, of course, to Boardwalk Lotus in Redwood City, California, for letting us take this Eletre out. This is 2% of all the Eletras in the United States, so we're, it's really kind of them to let us do it. And this color is unbelievable. Like, there are only a couple in this color. Take a look at the image of this car. It is truly, like, everyone who walked up to it today was struck by it. It's really remarkable, and so if you want that, give Boardwalk a call, because they've got one. And but we and of course we are very interested in hearing all of your comments and feedback, so please leave those below to us, especially the secret Apple Lotus group that we have run into the last couple of days. We know who you are. We're glad you're watching.
Shout out to the Apple Cupertino Lotus Club. We see you.
We if you know, you know. And thanks for watching.